Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Ewas. Welcome to today's webinar on tax season 2021, what we know about the Lookback and how organizations can act on it to support low-income families. We're going to give everyone just a minute to join the session, so we'll start formally in a few minutes. In the meantime, to keep you all engaged, an audience. So we're curious about who's on the call. Where are you all from? What's your industry and your role? So you'll see the options there. So it'd be great if you could select one. And as you may have seen in the write-up for the webinar, we'll take questions at the end. So this helps us prioritize questions to know who's on the call. Leave that up several more seconds. If you're just coming in, you can fill out that audience poll. We've got a lot of direct service nonprofits. We see some financial institutions, policy advocate organizations, under philanthropy. Welcome, everybody. We know this is a busy time and an important time at tax season, so appreciate you joining the call. And we think we have a lot of good content for you. So again, we're going to give folks just another minute to jump on. And before we dive into the content of the webinar, just wanted to cover some housekeeping. Hello, if you've just joined the webinar on the Lookback. So a few housekeeping points we'd like to address. You were able to send questions before the webinar. We got them, and thank you for taking the time to do that. If you have any other questions, you can submit your text questions and comments using the questions panel. Which should be on the right-hand side of your screen. And you'll see the questions panel is highlighted in red on the slide. So your participation is vital to this. We want to answer as many questions as we can, either during the webinar, following up from the webinar, over the next several weeks. And so your questions are extremely helpful. Please send them. And we'll have 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So again, ask questions. Don't be surprised if we don't get to them right away or if we're unable to unfortunately get to them during this webinar, but know that we receive them and that they'll factor into our work moving forward. All right, so let's get started with the content. Hello again, everyone. If you've just joined, we'll officially start the webinar now. This webinar is about tax time 2021 with a focus on the look-back provision and how organizations can make sure clients benefit from it. I'm Jason Ewas, the Senior Policy Manager at Commonwealth. For those of you who may not know us, Commonwealth is a national nonprofit building financial security and opportunity for financially vulnerable people through innovation and partnerships. The organization has a 20-year history of innovation at tax time and is working with Saver Life and Neighborhood Trust this tax season, along with several other partners, particularly on the look back. And we appreciate you joining us today. Again, we know this is an incredibly busy time of year. So to set the stage, we have EITC Awareness Day right around the corner tomorrow to our friends at Prosperity Now and the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities and many others. It's a big day. We have to pay particular attention to how this year's tax season will be different than any other. We know that in a normal year, tens of millions of families count on their earned income tax credit and child tax credit to provide a vital financial infusion to their households. We also know that this year, more than ever, families need a large refund to survive with increasing unemployment and economic and other uncertainty. The problem is that because of the way the credits are calculated, widespread unemployment threatens this financial lifeline, tax refunds for millions of families. Commonwealth analysis, which we presented at the November webinar, welcome back if you joined that one, showed at least 2 million families were on track to receive significantly lower refunds than they were used to, up to 80% smaller than typical. And families of color would have been disproportionately impacted, reflecting the structural inequities the pandemic has further exposed and exacerbated. Fortunately, and there is a fortunately in there, fortunately Congress included a look-back provision in the relief package that passed December 21st and that the then president signed later. Thankfully, The policy solution to that problem is in place. But I think as many of us know, our work has just begun. It now falls to organizations that serve and support working families to ensure this policy translates to household impact. We can do that by raising awareness of the policy and explaining important steps that tax filers need to take to benefit from it, no matter where or how they do their taxes. So that brings us to Commonwealth's work on the issue and to our webinar today. So I'll give a brief overview of our work on it, and then we'll go right to our panelists. So in partnership with tremendous organizations, SaverLife and Neighborhood Trust financial partners, Commonwealth this year aims to make sure that every eligible person benefits from the Lookback. That is our North Star. Every family that is eligible benefits from the Lookback. So what is our role in achieving that? The first step from our perspective is spreading awareness about it. The process is not automatic. We know that people use a variety of sources to do their taxes. We want to make sure everyone understands what's at stake and knows enough to make sure they get the highest refund, even if that process looks different for different tax filing places or websites. To start, in concrete terms, we put up a website, taxtimecrisis.org. This is obviously just the beginning, but we have to start somewhere. And right now, the website contains key information on the Lookback, and our most developed resource that's ready for use right now is recommended messaging on the Lookback, which you can go and download in PDF form from the website now. And you can see how to access there on your screen. We can talk more about that later, but we tested messages in partnership with SaverLife and Neighborhood Trust among the target audience, people with low and moderate incomes, with a particular focus on those who lost their employment for long stretches of 2020, to see which messages resonated most and made people want to learn more. We'll discuss those resources further in the webinar, encourage organizations to review the materials, and use them as they see useful to communicate the importance of the Lookback. The messages are open source. And the website contains materials for tax filers, but we'll build that out as we learn more. And one key takeaway of this webinar, I think we'll learn, is that we have a lot more to learn. And it's needless to say, this is a team effort, right? Our work, Commonwealth, SaverLife, Neighborhood Trust work, builds on and adds to the great work all of you are doing in the field. It builds on and works with the leadership of organizations and advocates that have led on the tax time issue for decades. And it builds on the work that the software companies and hard work that everybody is putting into this. You know, there's a quick turnaround here given the timing of the legislation. In summary, we will continue to build on this work over the coming weeks and months, and you can sign up on our website for updates. If you have already signed up, stay tuned for more updates. There will be many. And I will once again thank SaverLife and Neighborhood Trust for leading this work with us. So that's enough about Commonwealth for the moment, just for the moment. I'm honored and thrilled today to introduce our expert panel to discuss their work, Tax Time 2021, and the Lookback in particular. So without further ado, we're joined by Nina Olson, the Executive Director of the Center for Taxpayer Rights, Annalise Grimm, the Associate Program Director at Code for America, and Alan Gentle, Manager of the Roxbury Center for Financial Empowerment at the City of Boston, and a former colleague when I worked in the Mayor's office at the City of Boston for several years. So good to see you again, Alan. I know we want to get to our experts, but just to briefly set the stage, and there's a lot more about this, and our panelists will address it, but just to set the stage of what's in the Lookback. I talk about how important it is and what we need to do, but the sort of quick summary of how it works at the highest level is this. You'll see the steps on your screen in just a minute. For filers that earned less in 2020 compared to 2019, they can use their 2019 or 2020 earned income to calculate their earned income tax credit and additional child tax credit, right? So that's at the core of this, is that possibility. If eligible, the tax filer can enter in both years and determine which refund yields the larger refund. Different tax softwares will have different ways of doing that and are building that out, but that's how that process will work. And then ultimately, they'll be able to choose the earned income year that yields them the larger credit, right? And so that's a choice that the tax filer has to make that can be made easier. But to do that, they have to have both 2019 and 2020 earned income and be eligible under the criteria there. So we'll talk a lot more details about that, and I'm sure many of you have several operational questions, but just wanted to set that foundation. And so now we'll turn to our esteemed panelists. Nina in particular, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll start with the big question, and we know you have a lot to say on it. What do we know about the look back right now?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I think the first thing that we need to talk about is that the eligibility for ACTC or EITC is determined based on your circumstances of 2020. So the child has to live for EITC, the child has to live with you for more than half the year, have a social security number, etc. That's not changed. Like if you're not eligible for the EITC in 2020, the fact that you got it in 2019 is not part of this look back. So once you've determined that you meet all the other eligibility requirements for the EITC or the ACTC, the additional child tax credit, then you get to go through the process, and the legislation says for both the EITC and the additional child tax credit, you can choose which year's income, 2020, earned income, 2020 or 2019, will give you more EITC or ACTC. And why, for example, 2019, a higher income may give you more is that, you know, as the EITC, basically, as earnings go up, the amount of the EITC goes up, and then it plateaus out at a certain income level, and then it starts going down. But if you've lost your job and you've really got low income for 2020, and last year you were in that increasing range or at that plateau, or even on the going down side, your income may be, your earned income credit may be greater in 2020 if you use 2019. So then you get to the question of what's earned income. And generally what that is your wages, and then your Schedule C self-employment income, and you may have some self-employed farm income as well. And those things would be generally earned income. On the farm income, there's some adjustments there. If you're using software, that can go through. There's no one line on a return that says, here's all your earned income. It's got to be a combination of lines that you're looking at. But it's essentially, you know, wages and then Schedule C, sole proprietor income. And then, you know, there's a question about the Fed-state interplay, you know, because a lot of states piggyback off the federal EITC. They may say X% of the federal EITC. So Commonwealth has compiled a list of the states that have confirmed that they are going to also do the look back. And then there are 3 states that are not doing it. Well, 2 states and a territory, Puerto Rico, California, and I believe it's Minnesota. And so there you're going to have to go through your own calculations, and they will not do the look back. And then there's some states that either have to put out guidance or do some enabling legislation, and some of that is underway. So you really need to check with your state about what is going on. Are they actually going to do the look back or not? It's not a uniform rule, and it's not something that the federal government passes and then it applies to the states. This is up to the individual states. I know there have been a lot of questions about the non-filer portal, and you know, which was used during last year in order to get your, you know, the economic impact payments. I had talked to the IRS earlier in January, and they had not made a decision about whether they were going to keep the non-filer portal. Part of their concern was people used it and then didn't get their earned income credit. You know, the non-filers might have been eligible for a childless worker earned income credit, and that wasn't built in. I had encouraged them to build that in, and I am hearing from some people that it's not going to be available next year, but again, that was before the change in administration. So I think we need to stay tuned for that. I know there are many members of Congress very interested in improving the non-filer portal and keeping it up for those people that don't have a return filing requirement. So they can also get the child tax, the additional child tax credit, and the earned income credit, as well as their recovery rebate credit, for example. There, and then in terms of software, when I talked to the IRS, this was on January 7th, they were going into some weeks forward, having their communications with the software companies to make sure, what were they doing? Were they going to, if somebody had filed their 2019 return with that particular product, could they retrieve the 2019 earned income? That requires a lot of last minute programming, which is never good in a filing season. But I think you're going to have a different experience based on different software. I asked the IRS whether they were going to program into their system if someone picked the wrong year and underclaimed the credit that they were available, would they apply, if someone just did 2020 and it looked like based on IRS records 2019 earned income from the 2019 return would give them more, would they automatically adjust the return? And the IRS said that they are not going to do that, that if they had had more time, they could program that in. And I'll leave with that, stop with that, just to note that that's actually very important going forward, because there are many members of Congress that are pushing for this to become permanent. And so, knowing that the IRS could actually build that into their filing system if they knew that they needed it going forward is a big point that we all should be advocating for.
Incredibly helpful, Nina. I was taking notes the whole time because there were some great tidbits in there that we had called out. And I want to also call out the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, which sent us their list of the state and federal interplay. So their work on that is really leading the field. And so to transition there, thank you so much for that overview, Nina. Incredibly helpful. And Annalise, tell us about your organization a little bit and the work that you're doing to make sure people are prepared for this tax season. So overall, and then we'll talk about the look back.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Annalise Grimm. I'm the Associate Program Director at Get Your Refund at Code for America, and I use she, her pronouns. Code for America is a nonprofit that partners with government to improve the delivery of public services through human-centered technology. We use a few key practices in all of our work. We seek to build equitable systems. So we acknowledge that some systems are intentionally built to harm people or leave them out, and we're working very thoughtfully to try to make sure that we support the development of government services that are simple, accessible, easy to use, and have outcomes that are just and equitable for all Americans. So we're really doing this work from an equity perspective. And we also put people first. So at the center of all of our design process technology work are the people who were impacted by those government services. We lean very heavily on evidence, so we know decisions made in government have really serious impacts, and it's important that those decisions are informed by data and science. Wish we didn't have to say that, but we do. And we empower public services servants to deliver. So we're working really closely in partnership with government agencies and others to help deliver public services. And lastly, thinking about continuous improvement as this really core principle, policy, service delivery. These things are never finished. We improve them consistently. We have to go back to the drawing board over and over again as we learn what works and what could be improved. And so in all of our work, we're trying something small and continuing to iterate on that. And we work in a couple different areas, SNAP in California, benefits integrations in a few states, criminal record clearance across the country, and are just starting to get into the tax benefits space in the past couple of years. And we chose to work on the earned income tax credit in particular because it's one of the biggest public benefits for workers. It provides flexible cash, which we know really allows people to address their most painful problems. And we also, through our user research, have learned that there's dignity in cash that feels different to clients than other forms of support. So organizationally, we're really looking to emphasize cash support whenever possible. And as you all are pretty well aware of, there's a lot of money left on the table with EITC. Nationally, low-income households are missing out, we think, around $10.5 billion a year. It's an average of $1,300 for families in the participation gap, and 1 out of 5 households that are missing out. So we wanted to do user research to really understand why is it that if people are eligible for all this money, they're not filing their taxes. So we talked to folks who are in that earned income participation gap in California and in Colorado, and we heard some pretty clear patterns on why people weren't filing. One is that a lot of folks didn't think that they needed to file, especially folks in those lower income brackets. And often it was the people who could benefit the most from some of these tax benefits, and especially the stimulus, that were not filing because they didn't think they would benefit from it. Second, we heard story after story of emotional hardship disrupting tax filing. So that means like divorce, death of a close family member, shifting caregiving responsibilities, impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, all these things that really lead to folks having a hard time being able to sort of manage how their life is changing, and putting that down on paper in a tax return can actually be a pretty traumatizing experience for a lot of folks. So we think about our work needing to be trauma informed. And folks are overwhelmed. They don't know how filing taxes will impact student loan debt or child support payments. They're not sure how all of the different financial pieces of their household all work together, and need some support to be able to sort all of that out and understand how filing taxes can fit into that bigger picture. And then, frankly, trustworthy, affordable help is hard to find. And there are lots of things that seem like they're going to be free that aren't free, or don't meet client needs. And then they need help that's available when they are available, where they are. It's not always possible for folks who are working full-time, sometimes multiple jobs, trying to care for their families, to be able to get somewhere during business hours for a small window of time that might be able to provide free support. So when we think about all of our neighbors who are struggling, especially this year with the pandemic, we really feel organizationally that government has a moral obligation to make it easier for low-income households to file their taxes and to get the benefits that they should be getting access to. And right now, for lots of different reasons, it's falling short. And so our goal is really to support our government partners in being able to do this. So about a year and a half ago, we took all that research that we did and the stories that we heard and used it to inform the building of a new cool tool called getyourrefund.org. And we knew we had to build something that addressed a lot of those needs. So it had to be free and trustworthy. It had to be clarifying. People needed to be able to ask questions. It needed to be thorough. So folks who had to file for multiple years needed to be able to use it as well. And it needed to be accessible to people wherever they were when they needed it. And we looked out in the field to find partners, because we'd like to not do this work on our own, and saw that VITA was really this institution that really came very close to meeting client needs with this. It's trustworthy, it's clarifying, it has thorough service, has a really high accuracy rate. But VITA was struggling to meet the demand. Often we were hearing stories of 4-hour lines around the block for people waiting in line for tax prep services. So we decided to work with VITA and pilot a fully online intake and case management system that would allow VITA to bring all of their clients into one case management system, share them out with volunteers remotely, and hopefully that way be able to serve a lot more people. This was before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, we realized that as in-person services were closing, we needed to do even more. So getyourrefund.org now has a bunch of different services that are designed to meet people's needs. We have a VITA site location finder where people can go and find if there is a site that's open near them, which many sites are still open. There's a Valet VITA tool where you can have a client drop off documents and then upload them to the system to have volunteers work on the return. There's fully digital intake, so a client can use their mobile phone or a computer to take pictures of their documents and then get those up into the system and have volunteers work on them. And then we also have a DIY with help tool, which is basically free tax software that folks can use with a chat support tool with VITA volunteers who can coach them if they get stuck on a particular question. And then we also just have chat support that if people come to the website and they have questions about the stimulus or back taxes or anything like that, we can help route them to the right services and answer some basic questions as well. So 2020 was a really kind of crazy year for us. We thought we were going to work with 4 VITA partners. We ended up working with over 50 across all 50 states, prepared about 16,000 returns, got $62.6 million out into the community. It was a really exciting year, and we're looking on this 2020 year how we can build on that even more. So we've learned a lot. There are still some big barriers that folks face, including uploading the right documents. It's hard for a lot of folks to get the documents that they need and then be able to get them uploaded to the computer. So we're spending a lot of time figuring out that puzzle. And we're looking to grow even more. So this year we're going to be partnering with 106 VITA partners. Right now we have 3,400 volunteers in the system, which is crazy. We just launched about a week ago. So we're going to be really expecting the service to be able to help more people across all 50 states this year. And in particular, especially in our outreach efforts, and so if there are folks on the call that want to talk with us about potentially partnering on outreach, we're really focused on families in the EITC participation gap, people who are newly eligible for the stimulus, so mixed status families, incarcerated individuals. So please reach out if you want to talk more about that. And I'll end there. I feel like I have so much more to say, but I want to make sure that we have lots of time to get into questions.
Yeah, that was great. And I think, when you were talking about the barriers and the challenges that helped ground the work in the reality, that was before the pandemic. So just quickly, how is the look back factoring into that current work? How do you see that sort of filtering through? And we'll address this in more detail later, but just wanted to quickly follow up with that.
Yeah, well, in many ways, we have this really huge moment because filing your taxes also gets you your stimulus and other tax credits. And when you add it all up, it could really be a lot for families. And so the stimulus is sort of this extra incentive for folks to file their taxes that may not have done it previously. And we know from what happened in 2008 that you can sort of use that to bring people into the EITC and working with VITA and then keep them connected in years moving forward. So we want to make sure we take advantage of this year. But it also adds all these complications. So with the stimulus and then now adding a look back on top of it, it's more documents that those clients have to be able to get together and upload into the system. There are more different decisions to make and things that you have to make sure that you've properly claimed. Things like the non-filer portal kind of confuse people because they may have done that and then they weren't able to file taxes in the normal way. So all of this is really raising a lot of challenges. And so as getyourrefund.org, we're working with our VITA partners to figure out how to support clients to have the right documents, make the right choice on which year's earned income to use, and have resources available to help if they get stuck. If I can share a little bit more detail about what that is, maybe later in the call.
Great, it's very helpful. Thanks for that. And Alan, it's great to see you again. We were colleagues at the city for several years. So Alan, you run VITA sites, right? It's sort of on the ground, offering support to clients. Talk to us about how important refunds are in general, but in particular this year. So what the look back could really mean for folks. Oh, you may be muted, Alan.
Yeah, there we go. Hi, hi, Jason. It's a pleasure actually to be here with you and with everybody else. I want to thank you on behalf of the Mayor's Office of National Empowerment and Boston Tax Help Coalition. This is a tremendous opportunity actually for us to engage in this event. The coalition offers, we're on the ground actually, offering free tax preparation in 15 neighborhoods and 30 locations across the city. Some sites actually have integrated a financial checkup, which is a soft touch credit advising program to our services. And as we know, this has become more critical as well to pair it with tax services during this time, as folks have really terribly challenged by increase in debt. As practitioners, we're aware of the critical importance, right, of the financial infusion that the EITC, CTC provides in the lives of low and moderate income taxpayers. Effective this tax year, 2020, that we're speaking about, Massachusetts is one of those states that increased the EITC credit to 30% of the federal level. As practitioners, we also know that EITC provides a critical lifeline to too many taxpayers who have fallen as a result of the pandemic behind and further in debt. That includes arrearage in rents, mortgages, utility bills, education was mentioned earlier, and credit card debt. So EITC as a supplemental income is very important, and I feel like obviously we're preaching to the choir, but we can't say it enough. The OFE, the Roxbury Center, also provides financial education and financial coaching to residents across the city. Our footprints are in every neighborhood, and that the focus of that is really to engage residents and to provide them with the tools and the skill set to identify a financial goal that they'd like to pursue, and to support them in such a way that they'd want to work with us and to connect them with asset building strategies to meet their financial goal.
That's a great overview, Alan, of the work at OFE. And I remember I volunteered to do the financial checkup at the tax site. So Love to talk more about that later, and I think we can send out that information to our audience as well if they're interested. So we'll circle back on that, but just to break things up, we have another audience poll just to keep things going and break things up. And we want you to answer honestly. It is a genuine question. So will you use Commonwealth's recommended messaging? You know, and if you had a chance to look through it, feel free to answer it. If not, you know, please check it out. But this was the one that I referenced earlier, the one that we conducted a survey, and is meant to sort of generate interest and get people to click through to learn more about the look back. Because again, there are many technical ways that it can happen, and we see audience questions coming in about like how VITA volunteers will work through it and how the softwares will do it. There will be slightly different answers because there are so many ways to access, but this messaging is meant to sort of communicate the importance so that everybody's asking this. All right. Well, I asked you to answer honestly, so I'll take you all at your word. So we see 30% yes, definitely, 36% probably, 31% maybe, 3% probably not. We appreciate your honesty and recognize it's not for everybody. So in particular, we encourage you to view taxtimecrisis.org. Check it out, and we're open to feedback, right? I think we're all, again, with the tight turnaround, everybody involved in this process is learning more. So we're open to that, and reach out if you have any questions. And again, we appreciate you taking the time to join us for today's webinar and filling out that audience poll. So we'll do one more round of questions with the panelists, and then we'll do a Q&A from the audience. So Nita, back to you. What's the one thing that organizations can do, or if there's not one, we'll allow two right now to ensure that everybody who is eligible benefits from the look back? What should people overall really be focused on?
Well, I think, you know, the challenge is being able to get the information for the 2019 return. And I know that to me, that's where the messaging has to go. And you really have to think about how you explain earned income. And I think saying earned income means nothing to most taxpayers, at least that would be using VITA and be eligible for the EITC. So you have to really say, you know, wage income, salary, you know, wage income, what's your pay stub, you know, what's your W-2 from 2019? And did you get any 1099s, or did you have, were you were you in business by yourself? And use really common language. And emphasize that if people don't have a copy of their return, if they can find the return preparer who did it the year before, if it wasn't a VITA site, you know, preparers are required, who are not volunteers, paid preparers are required by law to give you a signed copy of your return. And so if the taxpayer didn't get them, that might be part of the messaging to say, if you didn't get them, then you can find your preparer from the other year. They have to give you a copy. And I guess, you know, part of the risk there is that if they go back to a paid preparer, maybe they're going to try to get them to do the return again for a fee, rather than go to a VITA site where they might be able to get it done for free. But those are sort of some trying to simplify those messages, but make them very pragmatic. And I will just insert here a question, which is, you know, that came up in some other calls. You know, some people who know about 7216 of the Internal Revenue Code, which says that preparers cannot use or disclose the taxpayer in the tax preparation information, the tax return information, for a purpose other than return preparation. And so some questions came up as well, can you use the 2019 return information for preparing the 2020, or is that a violation of 7216 of the Internal Revenue Code? And when I talked to the IRS about that, and my own legal analysis of it, because I am a tax lawyer, is that, you know, no, you need that 2019 information for the purpose of preparing your 2020 return. And so it's a permitted use. It's part of the return preparation process. So I hope that puts some people's minds to rest. If you've got it in your system, you know, you can use the 2019 and you can look up the 2019 information. and use it for purposes of 2020.
That's great, incredibly helpful. And Al, we'll go to you for this one. So for VITA volunteers, and we know a lot is going on and there's a lot in the works, but what's the plan for processing tax returns in the look back, including previous year's taxes? So particularly if they did their taxes somewhere else or did them themselves. So if somebody comes and looks like they might be eligible, what's the VITA process for that?
Well, VITA sites across the network are equipping VITA preparers with training to administer informed taxpayers of the look back provision. At the basic level, as Nina said, the messaging is that we want to really drive it home to taxpayers that they should present a copy of their 2019 tax return to the preparer. If the return was prepared by a private preparer, commercial preparer, they should have a copy of that. If they don't, as was said before, they should try to retrieve that. Then also for VITA sites, in most instances, we're able actually to pull up a copy of that return from the software that we use. Many of us are using TaxSlayer or TaxWise. We also try as much really guide our preparers to understand what the importance of really comparing those two returns with the income. So we will prepare the return with the 2020 income and look at what the result of that earned income tax credit result was, and then look back at the 2019 income and compare it with that, and actually enable the taxpayer then to make a decision as to which return is it that they prefer to submit to the IRS. So that's the process. For practitioners, obviously, to claim the look back, and we get into the weeds of it, on the 1040, you go to line 27, right? And then you insert beside line 27 the 2019 and then the 2020, and then write in the PEIE, which is previous year's income tax information. So that's our process. For the CTC. We follow the same process on line 28, and we do the same thing as well.
Great, thanks so much, Alan. And we're getting a sorry.
Jason, could just chime in here. One of the things that's really important is that the statute says EITC and CTC. And so if you choose to use the higher income for EITC, you have to use the higher income for CTC. And you can't split, you can't split the baby basically and be Solomonic. You have to, keep them together, the two halves. So you just have to keep that in mind.
Great, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Nina, for that. That's an important point, and something that wasn't, just based on the language is intuitive. So that's a really important thing.
Yes.
I just wanted to call out that question from Alan was adapted from a series of audience questions that have come in. Alan, everyone's very popular here, but Alan got a slew of questions directed at him. So the audience will appreciate that, and thank you for sending those questions in. Annalise, sort of generally speaking, again, sort of centered on the look back, but we can be broader as well. What resources would you recommend for organizations preparing for this tax season?
Yeah, well, we're definitely keeping our eye on the field. There's a lot that's being generated right now. And so part of our goal is to help collect all of that and work with you all to distribute it to all the VITA partners that we work with in the field more broadly. So we're keeping an eye on Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and AARP. They're developing some best practices for how VITA can do this, along with Taxpayer Opportunity Network. I think Nina always has good advice, so I'm like, listen to Nina always. And then Get Your Refund also is a great resource for clients. One of our biggest concerns is going to be our DIY folks. So we're going to be adapting the system to try to identify people who, before they click that DIY link and are completely on their own doing their taxes, or only if they reach out for help. Helping to ask a couple of additional questions to try to identify folks who had a big change in income between last year and this year and may need the look back, in which case we'll send them to the full service instead and get them connected to a VITA partner, because we really think that VITA is such a huge resource for folks, and the more people we can get that hands-on support. It's just a year that people are going to need a lot more real in-person help.
If I may add, Jason.
Go for it.
I'd like to reference, suggest that folks reference publication 596 for the EITC on the look back, and publication 972 for the CTC on the look back provision.
Great, good resources. Love it. We're getting some very tactical and practical advice here. We'll do our best to synthesize it and follow up so everybody has access to those resources. So that is what we've scheduled for the planned questions for the panel. We will now move to Q&A from the audience. And again, thank you for sending those in. Sometimes the panelists answer them through their questions, in which case we generally won't ask again. But we have a question from Francesca, which is, how best to manage this opportunity and ensure clients bring what they need to a tax appointment to take advantage of the look back, right? And we've heard this point again and again. Commonwealth emphasizes this on its website. All of our panelists have 2019, having your 2019 taxes is critical, right? And where to access that information on there, folks have discussed as well. Francesca continues, we've been asking clients to bring previous returns for years and they never do. So the question is, how to make sure that everybody brings what they need so that they can take advantage of the look back. And we'll start with Annalise, Alan, and then I'll chime in a little bit there as well.
This is such a good question. Documents are always the biggest challenge for folks when they're trying to access the benefit. We hear from folks all the time that finish the application for help and then just need a couple extra documents. They're missing one W-2 or something and can't get it. So we know having the entire 2019 return at hand may not be something that people have, especially right now as lots of folks are moving around with COVID-19. So this is going to be huge. And one thing that we've done, which it's possible others could do something similar, is we created a whole team of volunteers that we call the greeters. And basically it's their job to nudge the clients who've started the process and haven't finished it because they don't have the documents. So they're texting, calling folks, sending them emails to really provide some encouragement. Say, we know this is hard. Here's a resource. Here's a IRS website you might be able to get the info you're missing from, or here's advice on how to ask for this from your employer. Here's how to talk to that paid preparer and try to get your 2019 return from them. So we've really just designated a separate group of volunteers to help people get over that hump of getting all the documents together, and then they pass it off to the fully certified VITA volunteers to prepare the tax return.
And for us, actually, I just want to add to that, the coalition, we continue to work with our public and private partners, as well as our community-based organizations, to get the word out. We have mailed out really several hundred postcards to announce the importance of this provision, but also to encourage, as Annalise just mentioned, taxpayers to present their 2019 tax returns. We actually created in my site, and there are several sites in the Boston Tax Hub Coalition, who will offer two options for taxpayers to be able to access these services. One is a walk-in option, which is by appointment, and for those who schedule an appointment for walk-in, to bring in their documents to get uploaded into the getyourrefund.com. We actually will call them back and do the pre-screening and encourage them then again to send a message of the importance of that 2019 tax return. The other will be the 100% virtual as well.
Great, that's incredibly helpful. I think our audience would probably benefit from if you could share one of those flyers. We'll follow up with that just to see what that or the postcard to see what that looks like on the ground. That would be helpful. And from our perspective at Commonwealth, again, we want to be as supportive as possible to organizations on the ground. So we've this is why we've worked with many of my former colleagues in the city of Boston to get the messaging out, right? And the publicly available messaging that we have notes that, you know, the first step is really emphasizing how important it is to have these documents, right? And I think, you know, for people who are through Get Your Refund or other sources, nudging is really important, sending the postcards is important. And what we've done is try to create messaging that does as best we can, and we'll thank Formative, who is a consultant team that did the message testing in partnership with Save Our Life and Neighborhood Trust through Commonwealth to figure out which messages resonated. And so again, just one last time, we'll encourage people to look at taxtimecrisis.org. Those are publicly available. Use them how you want to, how they're useful. We really want to be as helpful as we can to all of you. In addition, another question from Danielle, to shift gears a little bit, is how the stimulus checks affect tax refunds. And Nina, I will direct this one to you.
Okay, and I'll also answer a question that came in that's sort of related from Jason. I think I can find that one here. So, you know, yeah, when I came into the IRS after 27 years of representing taxpayers before the IRS and tax disputes and preparing returns and everything, and became the National Taxpayer Advocate, I thought I knew everything about the IRS, and then I learned that I didn't, because once you're inside the door, you know, it's just absolutely amazing what you see. And one of the things that is amazing is the tax season filing process. And so what you have to think about is that the filing process is literally called a pipeline, and it's done in batches, and it's done in stages. And depending on where you come in, things can happen, or if things get screwed up. So someone asked about, you know, the fact that the second stimulus came out, and then you've got the filing season pushed back, and that's starting on February 12th. And of course, EITC and CTC were supposed to be, you know, that's when they're supposed to be issued on February 15th or thereafter. One thing you need to realize is that wherever February 15th lands in a given year, it may be the next weekly cycle for processing these returns and issuing these refunds. So the checks may not, or the payments may not go out until another week, depending on where February 15th lands. And in fact, what the IRS has said is that you really can't expect EITC and CTC to go out before March 1st. That's when they should show up. The other thing you need to know is that there are, you know, many returns, millions of returns that may be in the process that are not going to go out on March 1st, because there's something about that return that has frozen the refund. And the IRS needs to look at the return in more detail, and that usually involves a human being, and it may in fact involve something that the taxpayer has to do in order for that refund to be unfrozen and the return to be processed through. And then you add to that the stimulus payments, where there's a reconciliation. And, you know, I was National Taxpayer Advocate in 2001 when we had the first round of payments that went out in the summer. And I was National Taxpayer Advocate in 2008, you know, when we had the second round of, you know, the economic stimulus payments. And what we saw there was during the filing season of 2009, there was a huge jump of returns that didn't have the required information in them. And so the IRS had to make adjustments using math error authority. People left off a payment that they'd received, they overclaimed something. And so all of that can delay the processing of a refund that ultimately will get to the taxpayer. And then you add to that the pandemic, which, you know, we don't know where we're going to be during this filing season with the new virus mutations coming in, even as vaccinations get out, and even as the IRS has been able to get their people up and telework ready. So you have all of these challenges going ahead. And people really need to be, it's impossible to say be patient, but we need to understand the process by which these things work through before you start flooding the IRS with phone calls when the return is just stuck somewhere and will be released once it goes through these steps. But this is not comforting to folks.
Right.
If I might put a plug in for something, for those of you who are running VITA sites, I founded a low-income taxpayer clinic, which represents taxpayers before the IRS for free, and there are now 135 of them around the country. And I really encourage the VITA sites, if you've got taxpayers who have, issues from last year stuck, then or that people are being audited by the earned income credit, or they've got collection issues. These are really good issues to refer to a low-income taxpayer clinic in your community. And the last little note I'll make, because there's some confusion about this, when the economic impact payment was paid out, the first round of $1,200, and then the second, they were offset only for child support. They weren't offset for back taxes. And then in the second round, they weren't even offset for child support. But if you didn't get your full earned income credit, your full economic impact payment, those two payments in either of those rounds, and you're claiming them now on your 2020 return, you need to know, and your clients need to know, that the IRS, the law says that the IRS can offset that payment for back taxes, for back child support, for back student loan, for state taxes, the whole shebang. And so people who are expecting their rebate recovery credit that didn't get paid out last year may find, based on their circumstances, that they may actually not get it because it will be offset. The offset is not mandatory. The IRS could decide to not exercise the offset. And a lot of people have been advocating pretty strongly to the IRS that this is the year where if somebody's eligible for the EITC or a rebate credit, that you not offset that credit regardless of what the law says.
That's a great overview, and I'm learning so much as well as our audiences taking notes. I think so we have time for, we have about 4 minutes before wrap up. So I'll quickly address one audience question came through about, from Francisco, about what resource would the panel recommend to share with ESL communities. So Commonwealth and its core messaging is developing Spanish language ones, which will be out shortly. So we'll plug that within the next couple of days at latest. And then I know that EITCoutreach.org has a variety of additional languages and more materials in different languages. And then Alan, maybe it might depend on local resources, but languages are focused primarily in different communities. But those are the few that come to top of mind. If anybody else has additional ones, feel free to chime in there.
Go ahead.
In the Boston Tax Hub Coalition, we have always had, fortunately, the resources to have volunteers and tax sites across the network that represents 7 different languages in the city. So we cover 2 of the largest primary foreign languages, and then the others. So we also work closely in partnership with the Greater Boston Legal Services that actually does the type of work that Nina mentioned, but also provides those type of resources for Spanish-speaking taxpayers who need that assistance.
We also at Get Your Refund have a website version that's fully in Spanish because a lot of our VITA partners are able to serve clients in Spanish. And we're in some early conversations around how to expand that further, because across all those partners, we have a lot of language coverage, and we can theoretically move clients all around the country to get them served in whatever language they need to be served in. So we're we're looking at different ways that we could work on the intake part of it. So right now, if you do intake in English, you can potentially get served in another language over the phone when you do your actual interview with the VITA partner. But we're working on other intake methods. More to come.
There's one thing that is really a watershed for the IRS this year, which is that for the first time in the history of the IRS, the 1040 is translated officially into Spanish. And not only that, but a recommendation that I'd made for years was that there is going to be a question on the form where you can designate what language you would like to be communicated with in your notices, et cetera. And that is huge. And I encourage all of the VITA sites, that if you get that, if you have a client would prefer, even though they can speak some English, but English is their second language and they would prefer to be spoken to or get letters in another language, that you really utilize that. That's very important.
Great. I think on that note, I think that's a great note to end the panel, sort of leading with equity and access, seeing advancements in that. And that's what this tax season is about, particularly this year, and that's what the look back is about, is ensuring that families who really need the bigger refund get it. And so we'll thank every one of our audience members for joining us, and of course thank the panel. And we're going to wrap up with some key takeaways right before we go. So key takeaways, some of these will seem obvious, and given the details we went into, we'll have more to share. But one is look back is critical for millions of low-income families, right? And a part of what we're saying and doing is just sharing how important this really is and how much attention should be focused on. Second takeaway is organizations can take steps to ensure everyone eligible benefits from the look back. From Commonwealth, we have our set of messages that we developed. Each of the organizations here represented here outline resources, and of course there are several others. And visit taxtimecrisis.org to access messaging resources and get updates. Again, we want to work in partnership and amplify the great work that's going on, as well as developing our own materials such as the message testing. So with that, I will thank the three of our panelists for your time, for your knowledge, and for sharing with all of us today. I can see in some of the comments folks really appreciate it, and we did as well. Thanks to our partners at Commonwealth, Saver Life, and Neighborhood Trust financial partners for your continued work on this and getting the messaging survey out and getting us good results. And thank the audience. We know it's a busy time and appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to hearing back from you. We do have a webinar coming up on February 25th for those of you who follow the Commonwealth webinar circuit. It's in partnership with DCEA. On emergency savings and COVID. So a lot of our work at Commonwealth focuses on emergency savings. So if you're interested, you can find more info at buildcommonwealth.org/webinars. And yeah, thank you again for coming. Have a great afternoon or morning wherever you are. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.